Hi guys and welcome back. Today we're jumping in with a watercolor skin tutorial. And painting skin with watercolor is one of my absolute favorite things to do. It's really enjoyable to watch as it transforms from something very flat into something hopefully a little bit more lifelike. And I always love looking for new techniques and new details that I can include when I'm painting skin so that it has, again, that lifelike quality to it. So this is just one that I find I like to play around with a lot, and I like to be very creative with the way that I'm showing the way that I render skin. So for today's tutorial, I'm going to start with the first section where I'm just going to talk a little bit about color theory and mixing skin tones, and then I'm going to show you two techniques that I use when I am painting skin in watercolor. And mixing skin tones is actually pretty easy once you get the hang of how to break it down. The first thing to remember is skin tone usually falls on the orange area. It'll usually be somewhere between red and yellow on the spectrum. And you can have dark skin, light skin, anywhere in between. You can have cool tones, warm tones, but ultimately it will usually be based in orange. And when you darken orange, you get brown, and when you lighten it, you get more of a peach color. So really this is like the fundamental starting point for whenever I'm doing a more natural kind of a skin color. So what I'll do is I will mix any of my reds with any of my yellows. I have multiples of both of those, but you can use whatever paints you have. And I just take a red and a yellow and I mix it till I get the proportion of what I want. If it leans a little bit more towards the red side, that is a warm skin tone. And if it leans a little bit closer to the yellow side, that will be more of a cool skin tone. And when you mix those two colors together, you'll usually have a very bright, saturated orange, which is a little bit generally unnatural. You can totally use that color, but I like to knock it down a little bit in saturation so it has a little bit more realism to it. And it's really easy to do that. The way to bring the saturation down of a color is to mix its complement. So the complement of orange is blue, so I add just a touch of blue there. It'll bring it down, and it'll also bring the value down just a touch, and that will bring it more into the realm of realistic skin tones. And that's basically my formula when I jump into this. If I do want a darker skin tone, the way that I get a little bit more depth to the color, because it can be kind of hard to get it a little bit darker when I'm using just reds and yellows, and the blue, depending on that, can make it hard too, is I will use Payne's Gray. Payne's Gray is a cool toned gray, and it's really actually very gorgeous. And when you mix it in with colors, it adds a lot of dimension. So this is my go-to for deepening skin tone. I'll usually just have to balance it out with a little bit more red or yellow to bring that warmth back into it, so it's not super cool toned. It's looks again like skin, but that's how I knock down the darkness in skin so it can come down to different levels rather than being stuck in kind of a mid-tone color. So just to recap how I mix them, I'll start with one red and one yellow, and I'll mix those together, and then I will add a blue to desaturate it and then to bring the value down a little bit. And if I need it darker than that, I'll go in with my Payne's Gray, and that is my basic formula. And now we can move on to the techniques that I use when I'm painting. This first technique is my favorite way of doing it. I like doing it in this way because it feels a lot more free and interpretive, and I feel like it's a little bit more ethereal, and I just enjoy really pushing the colors that you can find in skin past the point of reality into a much more saturated, magical kind of a look. So this by far is the one that I have the most enjoyment painting. And basically it is like the same concept of how I will paint when I'm doing more of a natural skin tone, except I'm just kind of stripping away that natural base color. I like to go straight on the paper so that most of it is left just the paper white. And then I will take this really bright red. I actually love this paint. It's one of my favorites, but it's Quinacridone Red. And I'll usually use that for like where the skin is extra thin or where you'll have extra blood around that area. So where you blush, around shoulders, I like to put it, and on collarbones just to give it a little bit more dimension, and on the edges of ears and lips. So this color is very much what I use to give life to the skin itself. And then I will go in with a yellow just to give it even more dimension. Now I'll make sure that each layer and each color is completely dry before I move on to the next one. So that's really important to keep the crispness of where you want it to be. But after I let the red dry completely, I like to go in with this yellow and actually in some areas put it below it, almost like it's a shadow cast from that red, just to give it like this opalescent look, like it's red at the very top, and then the way that the light is hitting it, it becomes a yellow. And that's kind of how I think it through. So that's where I decide where to put just this little touch, but I do put a lot less yellow than I do red. And then I'll go in with a really beautiful clear blue color for the shadows. I believe that the one I'm using in this one is Cerulean. I'll have a link to all of the paints that I am using down below so you can know exactly what types of paints I have when I'm mixing this. But I will go in with a very light color of this blue and add it where the shadows are going to be. This gives it that depth that it needs, and I like how it almost feels translucent and it has that opaly quality to it by having a very saturated blue for the shadows. And after that dries, I'll go in with purple to deepen some of the areas that are in shadow as well. And this is just a process of building up colors. The important thing to remember with watercolors is that it's easy to go darker, but it's a lot harder to bring it back into a more lighter color. So think about it in steps of building up the value. Start with something lighter than you think you'll end up with, and then you'll be able to build to that final result. But as I'm painting, I'll let each layer dry and then I'll add more and more, especially in the blush area. That's the area that I really like to build up so that it has a really beautiful blend out into this white around it. That way it just has a really saturated area in the middle and then is diffused outward. And then it turns into a yellow and then blue in the shadows. And this technique works great in conjunction with if I want to do a darker skin or if I want to do normal, natural skin colors. I can use this type of thing with that on top of it. So if I wanted a darker skin tone, but I still wanted it to look very unhuman and fantastical almost, I would have a base color that maybe is more of a gray tone with these colors on top of it, and it would push that as well. And really when it comes down to skin, a large part of it is just get the values correct, and then you can play a lot with the colors themselves. And now we can move on to my more natural technique for when it comes to painting colors for the skin. So I'll start off with a base coat, and this one you want to go much lighter than the final result that you want. Watercolors, when you're working with it, you start light and then go dark. It's much, much easier to get a darker color than it is to lighten anything up. So it's always good to go in more cautiously and build it up to the final result rather than trying to go right at it and get that exact color and value that you want. So I will just get one working color down that's kind of a peachy mid-tone color, and I will let that completely dry. Again, I can't stress this enough. Make sure that each layer is totally dry before you add the next one on. And after I have that first base coat, it's actually very similar to that first technique, only tamed down a little bit. So I will mix extra of that initial skin tone for me to mix in with each of those colors that I used in the first one. So after I get that base color, I will take my Quinacridone Red and I will mix that in with the skin color and put it exactly where I put that same red in the first example. I will put it around the top of the cheekbones for the blush and a little bit on the nose and on the tops of the ears, shoulders, and the collarbone. And anywhere else that I feel like it would look good if it had that definition and that extra life to it. And it's really easy to blend out. I just put down where I want the main core of the color, and then I'll dip my brush back into the water, and then around the edge of that initial puddle of color, I'll just blend it out and feather it away until it has a very nice blend to it. And again, it's very similar to that first one. I like to have areas of the skin that are a little bit more red toned and other areas that are a little bit more yellow toned, since that is how naturally skin tends to be. You can see different undertones in different areas of the skin. So having that natural variation within it definitely adds more to its lifelike quality. And then I'll add the shadows in a very similar way, but if I want it to look very natural, I will usually add that blue into the paint on my palette first and then put it down, and then to deepen the color, I will, after that's dried, go in a little bit sparingly with just the pure blue on top of it. And I cannot reiterate this enough, it's all about building up the layers, and that's really the fun part, is just adding and adding till it gets to that final result that you want. I will add the blush until it gets a very nice, rich color to it. This one, I really wanted to push that blush quality to it. And I then end up adding freckles to both of these examples, actually. For the first one, I did a very pure Quinacridone Red color. But if you want very natural looking freckles, it's a good idea to go in with multiple colors. So I will mix a couple, some that are a little bit on the more yellow side, and I'll go in and add those in, and then I'll have maybe a darker color that I'll add a few more freckles and then a red color, for example, and add those in. And that really gives it that extra quality of reality to it, because when you look at people with freckles, you'll see that there's a lot of different colors present in that, and they're not all the exact same color. And it's a very small detail, but once you see it, it actually adds a lot to it. And then I like to finish it off with one final glazing layer. This one I went in with one that's a little bit more yellow, but it is a skin-based color. Once you add that final layer to the very, very dry layers before it, it has a very harmonizing quality to it, so it brings it all together and it looks really rich and pulled together. And now that I'm just finishing up these paintings, I just want to leave one final little piece of advice, and that's don't get yourself stuck in a box. I definitely experienced this for a long time, where I only painted skin in a real type way with real skin colors, and I didn't push things past what would be generally natural found. I love the fact that I can really experiment and be very creative with the way that I am showing skin. That is my favorite part about this, is that I'm beginning to get an idea of how to be a lot more fantastical and creative with it. So don't let yourself get stuck in one box of thinking that this is the only way to do skin, or that that's the only type of color that you can use. Mix so many different things together, try them all out, see how you like how it looks, and that's really how it comes down to finding out what you like and what your style is just by experimenting and pushing past those boundaries that you have. And that is it for today's tutorial. Hopefully that was helpful, or at least insightful to what I think about when I'm painting skin. But as usual, I'll have the originals from today available at my shop, so if you want to own either one of these, I'll have a link down in the description as well as in the end card. And if you haven't hit subscribe yet, please do. I do upload every Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. So also hit that bell, because you'll get notifications on when I post as well. But again, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys at my next video.